the name of the values that keep you alive. Do not let your vision of man be distorted by the ugly, the cowardly, the mindless, and those who have never achieved his title. Do not lose your knowledge that man's proper estate is an upright posture, an intransigent mind, and a step that travels on limited roads. Do not let your fire go out. Spark might replace the spark, and the hopeless swamps of the approximate, the not quite, the not yet, the not at all. The world you desired can be won. It exists. It is real. It is possible. It's yours.
Hello and welcome back to the Crypto Economy Podcast. My name is Mark and I'll be your host today. I'm here with Jared Moore. Jared, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for coming on. So just to get started, maybe if you could give us a little background about what you do, how you got involved in crypto, what your areas of expertise are, that'd be great.
Yeah, so right now I do social media for high net worth individuals and entities. It's like content creation and things like that. The first time I heard about crypto in general was in high school, actually. A friend of mine wanted me to buy a Bitcoin from him for $10, and I said, I don't know what that is.
Should have bought a couple.
So, yeah, right. So it cycled back around and I heard about it again. So I asked him, what's a cryptocurrency in general? And this was probably the end of 2016. And so we met and he basically just talked about what a Bitcoin was in general. And from there I was like, okay, this is crazy. This is going to be big.
Yeah.
I didn't put too much of an investment in initially, just because I was still trying to understand what everything was. But now that I've done a lot more research and been a part of the communities a lot more, I really see that, like, holy crap, crypto, blockchain is like a big deal.
Yeah. So how did you get involved with high net worth individuals and social media marketing? That sounds like an interesting story.
So my first job was at a golf course, right? Film the divots and all that stuff. But I wanted to get something away from that and more into the entrepreneurial things, since my family has been in like the entrepreneurial kind of mindset. So I was reaching out to people and saying, hey, I'll write articles for you, just get in the community a little more, learn a little bit along the way. And so I was connecting with big people, writing for them a little bit, and some people were like, hey, can you do some social media for me? So I started doing that. And it just started snowballing from there. I started going to these different masterminds in Beverly Hills and Los Angeles, down in Miami, connecting with individuals more. And along the whole process, it's actually interesting. I've been studying a lot of like psychology, a lot of the cognitive neuroscience behind like the marketing and how that plays into the whole marketing industry, right? So,
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's changing a lot.
Yeah, it's crazy. I got to see it firsthand now in crypto and blockchain, since it really exploded, how people are really like understanding it or trying to show coins to their friends and things like that.
Yeah, there's been a lot of that on social media. I mean, one thing you're seeing a lot now, Google is banning ads, Twitter is banning ads, Facebook is banning ads. Have you noticed that, and do you think that's a trend that's going to continue?
It's inevitable. Most of the big entities are trying to at least protect themselves. I know Facebook wants to protect their own ads. They're already getting a lot of flack from the political thing and the whole presidential influence and all that stuff. But they don't want extra headaches of fake ICOs or scams. It's the same as Twitter. Twitter just banned, I think, the ads. Google's going to ban it in a few months. And they just don't want the headaches. I know, like that last, I don't know if it was considered a hack on Binance.
Could you keep the mic a little closer? You're going in and out a little bit.
Okay.
No worries.
You can hear that?
Just want everyone to be able to hear you.
Yeah, so Google was banning ads, or they're going to ban ads in a few months, and it makes sense, because if you look at that last Binance, not technically a hack, but a lot of the people that were Googling Binance.com, they would get an ad that was Binance, but it would be different types of characters on it, so it wasn't necessarily that. So they're trying to prevent things like that.
Yeah, that was something that happened a lot back in the darknet days. There would be all these warnings to make sure the internet address was correct because people would just put up clone sites and you deposit into a wallet and it would be gone before you knew it. So I mean, I think on one hand it is good that they're trying to weed out the bad players. And I think it's important that people's first experience with crypto isn't a scam because that's going to keep them away. So on that hand, I think it's good, but at the same time, all these ICOs are raising millions of dollars, and I think it's becoming incredibly hard for them to market now. I mean, we at South by Southwest, we talked to a few ICOs, and they were still talking about using social media advertising, and they hadn't even realized that wasn't really on the table anymore. So I think that puts them in sort of a precarious position.
Good. It's a marketer's job to stand out. So
Yeah.
That it's good in that sense. But marketing for crypto, at least for like an ICO, for example, it's way different than marketing for a company or a personal brand. Crypto and blockchain, when you market for that, it's more about the authenticity and the actual proof. I hate
Yeah.
this pun, but proof of work, like the
Yeah.
actual proof of things being accomplished and the transparency of it all. It's great to have a big team. It's great to have a lot of funding. It's great to have the great tech. And that's what you can market on. It's not necessarily the ads of, hey, we're doing an ICO and it's 15% off if you refer a friend. That's spam. And so,
Yeah, a lot of people, they just get some great graphics. They have their branding team, but that's really all they have. People don't realize there's no technology to back any of these things up, and often they don't even know if it's possible. You look at something
crazy.
like Robinhood, they raised upwards of $80 million, and Robinhood comes out, adds crypto, and basically invalidates their entire business model.
Exactly.
So all those people are definitely kicking themselves. So, have you had any experience helping ICOs market, or is that something you're trying to get more into?
I haven't been marketing with ICOs. People do come to me and ask me, what should I do? And in general, I'll just give them guidelines. I don't charge or anything for that. I just think in the general crypto space, if it's a legit project, then it deserves general marketing, at least help for free.
Yeah.
Most of the cryptos in general that I've been approached with are garbage, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
So that's not something I really want to help with.
So, what are some of the things you would suggest to those companies?
For an ICO specifically?
Yeah, or just general marketing strategies in this space that you think are still effective. That's something we've spent a lot of time thinking about. It's one of the reasons we started the podcast. We thought it's better for people just to actually hear from the team, understand what they're about, what they're trying to do, get updates that way. You can follow along more easily.
For the people that really want to dive deep into this, go into the community first. That's on Twitter. Okay, so crypto is really big on Twitter and Telegram, and a little bit of Facebook, but not really. Go into Twitter, follow the top traders, the top developers, Charlie Lee, Fluffy Pony, and Andreas Antonopoulos. See what they're tweeting about, talking about, because usually it's the top information of the industry at the time. It's not like the government is wishy-washy on a certain few laws, and they won't really tell you until a certain day of a meeting. Usually these influencers in crypto give their real-time thoughts on it because they're more in the mindset of decentralization, of helping people rather than for profit necessarily. So be in the community more. Go to the events. If you're doing an ICO, go to some events and just talk about your product. Focus on the tech, focus on the transparency of the whole entire thing. A lot of people, when I say, what does your project do? They say, well, it's like Bitcoin like this. You know how Bitcoin does this and this.
The
and then
Uber
they talk
of...
about Bitcoin the whole time.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to talk about the competition. We're not here to beat anybody out. We're here to just build a better future. So focus on what you are best at and then start talking about that.
Yeah, I think some of the problems people run into where it's such a complex idea to begin with. It takes a lot of explaining sometimes just to get people to the point where they can even understand the pitch. I mean, that's something we've had trouble with. We entered a pitch competition at Columbia, and most of the judges, the feedback we got was, well, you got to explain this stuff for us first. And it's like, well, if I explained every single, background of every single product, we'd be here for months because there's so much to it. So it can become especially hard when you're, trying to market a product to people who don't understand, really any of it, I think, to get the point across.
And that should be a good gauge of where we're at in the industry in general. Most people still don't even understand what a Bitcoin is.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that still ask me what that is in general, and the fact that they're asking that question gives good insight on these people trying to raise money. It's like you're not going to raise money from people that don't even speak your language.
Yeah. But that is interesting too. It's global in nature. That's one of the reasons why these ICOs can raise so much money, because you're crowdfunding globally. So I think there might be an interesting push to go more international with a lot of these companies. I don't know if that's anything you've seen or anything you've done, but international marketing is something people in the US really don't think a lot about. I guess we're just a little self-centric.
Yeah. In terms of that, there are a lot of projects that will either house themselves outside the United States specifically, or if they're in another country, they'll pick a different location for the legalities of however they're operating.
Yeah,
and so
Gibraltar has become popular.
Yeah, so they will be marketing different. I think the Petro, the Venezuelan one, that was marketed to essentially the entire world to say, hey, we have this new crypto that's backed by oil, when it's not.
Yeah.
You can't really enforce that.
Yeah.
But
I think
that's going to be... Yeah.
Go ahead. I was going to say, a lot of these countries are just doing it to get around sanctions, our sanctions, more specifically, it's kind of an ingenious way of going about it. But, that's why, Trump just signed an executive order prohibiting Americans from buying the Petro. So it throws us into some interesting regulatory
That's
space.
interesting in itself, because most of the people investing in the Petro, I guess if they're investing in it, they don't understand it. But if you're not investing in it, you'll most likely understand that it's a scam. But it's interesting he signed that, because it's more of a political thing at that point. The market would have spoken for itself, and the market, from what I've seen, hated the Petro. So it's just interesting that was in the media, that he signed that. So I think that's more of a political play.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is unfortunate to a point, because I think a lot of countries like Venezuela actually stand to gain the most from cryptos and blockchain in general, because their infrastructure is so bad to begin with, and their institutions are, less credible than crypto, and their currency gets eaten away by runaway inflation every couple of years because the governments are unstable. So I think it's unfortunate that they're trying to institute the currency, but it's likely to fail because they're doing it under the guise of this centralized government, centralized, sort of dictatorship, instead of the true purpose of, decentralizing the economic system, giving the power back to their people. And it might sort of give it a bad name in a lot of these circles or people who are paying attention.
I kind of want to mention as well that the whole buzzword is decentralization. Decentralization of the governance is great, but it will never be fully 100% decentralized, and it have to have some kind of centralization. That's just how things are going to work. It's like the yin and the yang. But living in a mostly centralized governance system is going to be not good for people.
Yeah, I mean, so do you think, because I can understand why that would be the case in individual countries, if individual countries were, printing their own or creating their own cryptocurrencies. But if it's a global system, it seems like you could sort of force centralized powers out of the equation just at scale. If Bitcoin became the new global currency, then these centralized governments, wouldn't have nearly as much power.
Right. So there are kind of two things I could talk about with that. Is that I could never see that actually happening. In theory, it'd be cool, but I don't actually see that happening, because if you look at the leverage, like forget the money, but like the real estate and the political leverage that these massive powers have, like they've been in power for like hundreds or even thousands of years. So it's not gonna, Bitcoin's not gonna be the game changer, you know.
They're definitely not going to go quietly.
Yeah. So it'll be a nice tool to help, not redistribute income, but help give people a fighting chance that are struggling with the super inflation and things like that.
It gives people the option to operate outside of, the economy that they were born into.
Yeah, and what's interesting about the governments in general too is that there's a person named Tony Lane Casserly. She talks about this a lot. Her brand is like culture, and she is talking about how governance is going to be changed in general for humans with blockchain, and how we don't necessarily need, for the United States, we don't need an IRS anymore.
Yeah.
Because we can just use like a smart contract and it'll divvy up the money however is needed. We don't need a central government anymore. We have localized governments that can take care of themselves. Now we'll need to decentralize, like, I don't know, the military and things like that, but governance is going to be changing a lot, especially with the e-citizenships for like Estonia and all those other places. It's going to be super interesting in the next 5 to 10, maybe 15 years of who's going to be living where and what kind of citizens we're going to be. And The Sovereign Individual, that's a book that was written in like the 90s. It talked about cryptocurrencies in general.
Really?
And it was talking about how everything's going to be more localized. And the fact that is going to be, let me just, what was it?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think localization is the ultimate goal. The more centralized something is, the less people are going to be happy, because the more you're going to have one size fits all solutions that are clearly not going to fit all for all the people you're trying to encompass. And I'm hoping things move that direction, but it seems like people don't understand that, that's the way where you're most empowered in your government, when you decentralize it to the local level and you have the most say, because there are less people, in the voting pool.
And so how a lot of governments act right now, this is what I was looking for in this book. A lot of governments treat their people kind of like slaves. So they'll say you have to work, and pay taxes, and then we'll take as much as we want out of it. And then they get to distribute however they want to distribute, and they can print the money. So going forward, it's going to be interesting, because governments are, especially with anonymous currencies like Monero and Zcash, governments are going to have to treat their people like customers. So they're not going to be able to say, you have to pay this much, this. They're going to say, if you want our citizenship and our rights and our different things, and we'll offer like this package to you, and then you have to pay based on that.
Yeah, sort of, along the lines of the governance, the central banking system on a global scale, I think, does something very similar. They're constantly creating debt through easy credit. Countries are happy to take on that debt to satisfy voter bases, because everyone wants something now, and they're willing to kick the can down the road as far as paying for it. And when you have terms that are only 7 years, it's not your problem at that point.
In general, like the infrastructure for the entire global economic system is so weak. Like the cool thing about this blockchain stuff is that it's been a rabbit hole for me. So I've gone from learning, why do we need Bitcoin? Well, what about the Federal Reserve? Oh, they're printing money. That's like obvious, but what's the real ramifications of that? The past 100 years, the U.S. dollar, the purchasing power has been tanking. And then I go look at the euro, and the euro is doing better than the U.S. dollar, but it's still not doing well. And you see there's a centralized bank in every country. Well, that's not good, because their centralized authority controls, like, if you control the money, you control the government. So a centralized authority controls basically every government. And then some centralized banks are going into negative interest rates. So that's just, It's
Yeah.
not looking good in general.
And if you look at actually the countries, or at least the dictators we've tried to unseat over the past 15 years, like Libya, for example, a lot of these are countries that didn't have central banks, and now they do, which is sort of interesting. Russia is one of the last holdouts, for example. So it seems like the countries we pick a fight with tend to also be countries that don't seem to run on this system and play by our rules. And sort of, in that, I think it's interesting as far as the economic system goes. Something I sort of discussed with you earlier, talking about money in and out of a lot of these pools. When you notice the price of Bitcoin goes down, a lot of people don't realize that, the same, I think it's 15,000 or so people control most of the volume, most of the coins in circulation, and a lot of these players now are becoming institutional investors. So you'll have a hedge fund, and when hedge funds are making decisions, you'll notice that if the interest rates of bonds go up, the price of Bitcoin will go down. They'll just pull money out of one market, create a bunch of sell orders, the price will be forced down, and they'll move it into something safe like bonds that they're more comfortable with. Or just today and yesterday, as the price of Facebook has been getting hammered, money has been moving out of tech and back into Bitcoin, and the price of the dollar has actually increased. So a lot of people don't realize it's the same pot of money all these guys are playing with. BlackRock Investments, for example, they control $20 trillion, which is absurd. That's, I think, an eighth of the global GDP in one hedge fund. So these guys are deciding what happens, and so I don't think that's a good benchmark as to how well these cryptos are actually doing and their long-term success rates, which I don't know if a lot of people correlate.
Right, and on top of that, we have the Tether. I think just today printed another 100 million Tether, so or like 300 million or something. Like,
yeah, Tether. It's actually out of Austin. We know some of the founders, and one of our advisors, or someone who we've been working with, helped their founding team. But they've been getting into a lot of trouble lately. I mean, the idea makes sense, but the way they've gone about business and the way a lot of these founders have, I think, is important to note. Even Vitalik, for example, these are not necessarily business-minded people. I doubt he had any real financial experience before. Our co-founder actually was the runner-up in the hackathon where he invented Ethereum. That I think it's important to note that a lot of the techie guys at the forefront of this stuff don't necessarily have the business experience or the forward thinking to create sustainable models around it. And I think that's something really important to look out for. And you look at, Charlie Lee, for an example, has done a good job, I think, of being prudent about how he takes the coin forward. He's making good business decisions, finding good partnerships. And linking back to one of your earlier points, it's interesting, talking about Twitter. A lot of these guys are very approachable. One of my good friends from high school just messaged Charlie Lee on Twitter, and he said, all right. Wow. He said, you can hop on, help me with this project then. And, he's been telling me for, 6 months about, he's saying, big stuff is coming. And sure enough, you watch and, there they go. So it's a great community, and I think there's a lot to be said about it.
That's a very powerful point you bring up, actually, is where you get your information from. Like you're getting your information from your friend or from Charlie Lee specifically. It's like a big problem, is that the FUD is going crazy because one article might surface or a rumor might surface on Reddit, and then people will drop a coin for 30%. And they'll pull all their money out. But it's very interesting because it seems like you have it down as well, to where you really have to, and in general, I mean, you look at the news today, you have to really verify where you get your information from and how credible they are and how biased everything is.
Absolutely. That's why we started our news site. So our CFO, he runs Crypto Signal, which is a blog on Quora. He's been doing for about 5 years. I think it's the most popular crypto blog on Quora, or at least it was recently. So that's sort of how he got his information out, and we've been piggybacking on the guys that we're working with, because they've been around forever. They know this stuff inside and out. But, a lot of those guys aren't the ones, writing articles, telling people about it, telling them what to look out for, differentiating the technology. A lot of people don't understand, what a fork is, or they don't realize that it takes, 3 lines of code to do some of this stuff. They just change the block size, for example, and create a new currency. So there's a lot of misinformation, and there's just some poor information out there as far as understanding what it actually is, how you create it, how difficult it is, what the pros and cons of different ones are, and
For sure.
a lot of companies. Sorry,
it's
go
super
ahead.
interesting. Sorry to interrupt you, but it's super interesting. Like exactly what you're saying is that people don't understand what a fork is. People don't understand, what a private key is, and it's interesting because people are still willing to throw tens of thousands of dollars into it.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I get it, because there's a lot of money to be made, but there's also a lot of money to be lost. I started, let's see, in October I had 3 Bitcoins, 20 Ether, and throughout the semester managed to get stolen or, sketchy margin calls. That's something to look out for. People don't realize, since our co-founders started, I think it was the second exchange back in 2013. It was called cryptoexchange.us. They know how the back end works, and they understand how these things are being manipulated. And once you understand that, you see, okay, well, they make most of their money on margin calls, which means they can artificially push the price down because they have all the price levels at which your margin calls execute. So you'll look at a chart
right back up.
Yep, exactly. And so there aren't a lot of transparent business practices out there, and I think it's getting better now that more money is flowing in and more reputable people are starting to come to the forefront. But it's still a big problem for the average Joe, and that's sort of what we're trying to tailor a lot of our products to, is people who haven't had this, haven't had a lot of experience, especially with tech or finance, because the intersection of both is an incredibly confusing place for most people.
And props to you for that, because that's definitely needed.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the problem, is the technology it's incredible, and I think it can do so much good for so many people once they understand. And to understand, I think a lot of people need to just give it a shot and watch it play out before their eyes, because seeing is believing. So it's just a matter of making it easy enough for people to get their feet wet.
And it'll come too, especially with Lightning Network coming. It's super easy to buy, even like Litecoin in general, and send it to a friend.
Yeah.
Like the knowledge gap will close naturally. The tech gap will close naturally. There was just a lot of hype, and then people didn't understand what it was, but they threw money in. And now that the hype is gone by far, people are starting to actually understand it, and people are the tech is catching up. So that's good.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think there have been a lot of issues just with business models in general. So many of the people doing this stuff, they have a tech background. They aren't thinking about the best practices. And the thing is, you can make just as much money being transparent if you have a smart business model as you can scamming people. So it's unfortunate that a lot of people haven't thought about that.
And also to tag along with that, the people investing into cryptos. It's like you can make 30% gains in a day on basically any crypto when there's like a big bull run like we just had like in the last day.
Oh yeah.
So when people are saying, what's the best coin, I often ask them first, what's your investment strategy and all that. But what do you ethically support? Like, what do you want to see in the future? Because like you're betting on it right now. So
yeah. Exactly. I think the best things you can do is just listen to the team talk. Zcash, those guys have been really good about that. Just hearing what the actual founders have to say. You can get a pretty good idea of where things are going just by doing something as simple as that. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about social media more specifically. So one of the things we're starting to finalize development on, and we should be rolling out soon, is something called Clubhouse or Starspace. We haven't figured out the name quite yet, but we're working on changing sort of the traditional social media ad models where, with CPU mining, you can pay people for engagement just because their computer is, running in the background. Or there are a lot of things you can do that actually get people, reward people for their engagement, which is essentially what advertisers are trying to do. They're just trying to milk people for their engagement, but there are other ways of doing that. Do you see any sort of shifts happening? I mean, I know Google is starting to throw people off YouTube, and Twitter is banning all sorts of people, and Facebook is in hot water for the data that they're giving out to people. And I think it's interesting to see how much focus they've had on just getting as much data as they can on people, but then just using it to sell them things. And it's kind of a roundabout way of going about it, in my opinion.
Yeah. And let's see. We'll talk about like
Yeah,
content
we hit a
creators
lot.
in general. Yeah. And content creators in general. A lot of them, at least from that Drake and the Twitch hype thing, a lot of them are going over to Twitch now, and it's interesting based on like YouTube, Twitch kind of wars of like the video live streaming. A lot of people are going to Twitch because they can now control their income. So a lot of the big influencers were getting demonetized for saying one bad word, or they make an inappropriate reference, so they can't have any creative freedom. And so when they go to Twitch, they can have that same creative freedom, even though it's live. I'm sure Twitch is probably working on something, but they can have that creative freedom because people can speak with their own money. They can subscribe to you like $5 a month. They can tip you, so the money will come. So that's like, it's the influencers control like where everything's at. And the micro influencers and influencers are going to control where all the products are bought, where all the coins and the crypto projects are talked about. And I mean, we've seen that since Charlie Lee has been getting bigger, so Litecoin got bigger. It goes hand in hand.
No, I think it's crazy when you look at what the Super Bowl brought in as far as viewers versus what someone who you wouldn't even consider famous on YouTube gets on a weekly basis. The numbers are they're crazy, but as far as advertising goes, they haven't done a great job of matching up advertisers with these people to actually get them paid. And one thing we're trying to focus on is more of an endorsement model where people who support a product, who use a product, they're going to know their audience. They're not going to want to tarnish their image by trying to sell them some piece of crap, because then their reputation is on the line. But at the same time, if you've got a makeup channel on YouTube, you have a good idea of who your audience is and the types of products they're gonna want.
And that comes back to community too. So there's a bunch of different communities. So there's a big community for crypto. If you get into that group, then you at least understand what's going on real time. And there's a big one for social media and like the current marketing and all that. So there might be a couple Instagram pages with like 10 million followers, and they're all friends. So they all link to each other for different business deals. They say, oh, I have a friend that has a makeup account, or I have another friend that has like home do-it-yourself projects. And so it's getting in those communities is really where people succeed. Is if you can get a friend in there, or if you can get yourself in there, and maybe even pay the buck, get everything on the back end figured out, and then do like an influencer project or like what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. We're trying to automate a lot of that, so advertisers will be able to submit bids, and we're gonna automate a lot of the postings, so you can just check boxes, push to a bunch of different platforms. You can set a time limit. So if I'm trying to sell my my makeup kit, I can go to some makeup tutorial girl on YouTube and say, I'll pay you $10,000 if you push this caption with this ad to Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Or they can say, we just want you to put this in your endorsed products page, and we'll pay you $5,000 a month to keep it there, so that their fans know that these are products that they're behind. But there's a big gap, I think, between the bigger channels. So, I knew a girl in high school who she's got like 10 million subscribers on YouTube for makeup tutorials. And, but until you get to that point, until L'Oreal hopped on board and Maybelline hopped on board, she wasn't making much money because there wasn't a platform for smaller advertisers. Maybe it's a startup or, to connect with them that way, which I think is probably a lot of what you do, I'd imagine.
I do a lot of like the content creation and kind of general guidance of the social stuff.
And got you.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff too. I mean, if there's influencer campaigns and like I know people to connect with. So
what types of people do you typically work with? High net worth, obviously, but so what kind of people and what do they typically want, and how do you do that for them?
Either like a business owner with like a legit product, legit history of success, and they have a goal for social media, or people in general that just want a better online presence. And better can be subjective in many ways. Some people just want more engagement. Some people have like a little ego thing where they just want better pictures of them posted. And it's because they like the little likes on their phone and stuff.
Yeah.
It all depends on the person, but most people will have a product, and then it's like retargeting through funnels. So you can have a product, you can have a product, gather information, you can upsell a more expensive product to people that really vibe with your vision. So it just, in general, it's people that are successful that can afford to have decent marketing budgets.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And have you had, any sort of pushback from some of these social media platforms or any problems in dealing with them? Do you think they support the secondary market they've created for a lot of this stuff?
There hasn't been much pushback necessarily. At least I haven't felt it that much. I know a lot of my friends were getting their Twitter accounts shut down. A lot of my friends are getting their Instagram accounts shut down, YouTube channels. So it sucks for them, but
yeah.
For me personally, not really, because I don't try to have a big single account. I try to have at least my clients have their name across multiple accounts. So in case one does go down, then others are still flourishing pretty well. And what was the second part of your question?
If you think they sort of support the secondary market they've created. So I think it's, they've created all of these jobs for people like you who are just, managing this content. And it's interesting they haven't really tried to help out. They haven't put out any software that makes that easier, or they seem to be kind of letting it happen. But it seems like
Facebook has some representatives that reach out to people. So some platforms do try to do that. But there are even different markets that are being created, like buying and selling Instagram handles or things like that they know about, but they don't really, they manage it, but it's not a big emphasis for them. It's more about the usability and the direction of the platform.
Yeah. Have you noticed issues with, buying and selling things like followers? So that's something, I've had some experience with.
Don't buy fake followers.
Yeah, I used to sell them to businesses and people who wanted them. I would just flip them from some guys in Vietnam and China, but they don't like anything, and it's pretty obvious. But I'm curious. Yeah, I know they've done a lot of purging for things like that, but it seems like those guys are always one or two steps ahead. I know there were millions during the presidential campaigns that people, my business partner actually did some analysis to figure out, what percentage of every candidate's followers were fake. And it seems like that can be sort of a problem, especially for advertising, if you don't even know how many people are real that you're expecting to be getting impressions of what you're doing.
Right. So if you have fake bots in general, it's that whole aspect of you're not sure if someone's legit or not, but it's also if you go to someone's Instagram and you see that they have fake followers, it kind of just looks bad.
Yeah.
Because it's why do you need fake followers?
Yeah.
And then it also doesn't help with their engagement. So then their importance in the algorithm isn't as much. And it's not necessarily like from a big scale political of like bots, as it is that people can. And Tony Lane Cassidy, I'll mention her name again. She talks about this a lot too. Is true media isn't just bots. True media that we don't know about is people literally, like an organization, paying somebody to go in and manage different accounts on Facebook or Reddit, Twitter, and they will act like they're like normal people. They'll connect with your friends. So it's like, I have 43 mutual friends. I'll add them on Facebook. Why not? And then you start seeing their posts, and their post is like spreading a fake article about something, and then that fake article will make you think a little bit differently. So it's like these like covert operations that you don't even understand are actually made to go against your own psychology. So
yeah, I think that stuff is really interesting, and it's not that hard to do. So there are a lot of people don't realize all over Facebook, especially places like Yahoo News and the comment sections, they have bots running that'll just sort of, they're trying to inflame people. So they'll just use really general phrases like, some simple political retort or something, calling someone a racist or calling someone a socialist, but it's just meant to sort of inflame people. But in doing so, there's more engagement. It makes it seem like more of a hot button issue, or it's all about the perception of who cares about what. And I think that can have probably a big impact when it comes to things like elections. And people look to the internet, they look to Twitter to see what's trending, for example, and we know that Twitter messes with those algorithms. So having some experience with those algorithms, have you noticed anything? Are you kind of always trying to figure out how the algorithm works and how to best get exposure as a result?
In general, I specifically try to focus on the communities that people are trying to be a part of. The algorithms do play a part in like how we word different things. I don't know if you saw back in the presidential election, there was like a blue news feed and a red news feed. And so people that were typically Republican would only see Republican-based ads. So if a client is, for example, like super Republican, trying to get a Republican message across, then I will probably target it more toward the red kind of feed. And there's no way to like actually see if that's a thing because we don't have the data on the back side. So we don't know if they fixed the problem right now. We don't know if they're still doing it. We didn't know they were using the data for other things that were not just for marketing. So if you're not in the inside, you don't know.
Yeah, that's sort of one interesting insight we got, because we were developing an app back in 2013, and so when you're doing that, you get to see all of the privileges that Facebook will give a developer, or things that Apple will let you see, and it's pretty terrifying. I mean, we were able to geofence an area, and we could tell it was a tutoring app, so we could tell when the person showed up. The session wouldn't start till they entered that Starbucks, and if they left at any time, it would cut it short at that time. We can get all sorts of insights about what other apps they have open at the same time as they're using our app. Within Facebook, if you have Facebook even open on a tab, they can tell what you're looking at in all of the other tabs. They're taking all of your data. And it's scary that at this point they really don't even know what to do with it, but they're sitting on it. So if you go to Facebook and you hit the I forget what the button is exactly. It's something like get all account data, or there's a button, and Facebook will send you everything that they have on you, and it's like 100,000 pages. Every message, every like, every anything you've done, they have every bit of it.
And that's super scary in itself, because a lot of people say, I don't need privacy, I have nothing to hide, but it's not that necessarily. Like if you look at a war, you wouldn't want any other party to know all this information about you and you don't know anything about them. The government is under no obligation to be in your favor. I know that's what it's there for, but it's centralized and people are people.
Yeah.
So it's interesting with that information all being gathered by Facebook alone. Facebook, Google, all those big companies, So when they store their information, sometimes they'll be moving their information to different data centers. So sometimes that's outside the United States. So talking about the United States specifically, when that happens, the NSA just signed a law, or they just got a law signed for the NSA that allows them to pickpocket any information that goes out of the country in terms of quote unquote foreign surveillance of terrorism or things like that. So now the government has full access to everything you're doing online.
Oh yeah, I mean they have forever. I mean there's actually a program in place. I think it was called the Five Partners Policy or something like that, which was essentially a roundabout way of collecting information on a country's own citizens while it was still illegal. So when the NSA couldn't spy on us, they would go to Britain and say, okay, we'll spy on your guys if you spy on ours, and then we'll trade. So they find clever little ways around all this stuff. But I think companies are almost scarier in a lot of ways. I think a company should be able to do whatever they want on their platform, but I think people need to understand what that is, and that's the problem right now. So people need a viable alternative somewhere else to go if they don't agree with a lot of these policies, and they don't really have that option right now, and most are unaware because they're controlling the flow of information. So anything that paints them in a bad light, they're discounting.
And it's not even just online. Like I mean, this is the exact rabbit hole I was talking about with crypto and blockchain, because it deals directly with that as well. It's like when you go to school, all that information has been specifically given to you for a reason. Like you're told to trust it because that's all you know. Your family's gone through that. That's all they know. It's the truth in their sense. But then you dig a little bit deeper, and you'll find out that history really isn't necessarily what has been.
Yeah, they're curating a worldview, and a lot of people aren't willing to question that, which can be scary. I think that's one of the most interesting things about a lot of these media companies, traditional media, getting caught outright lying, or at least with extreme bias, and you start to think back, okay, well, what else have they then been lying about, or what else have I not been hearing about? And it seems like, I think omission is one of the most dangerous things, because maybe they're lying, but what aren't they telling you at all? So what isn't getting in the news? And for example, all these there are a bunch of bombings in Austin. I was just there last week, but if you look at the coverage of the bombings versus coverage of like a school shooting, for example, it's significantly less, because I don't think there's really a narrative push there. There's they're not going to take away our bombs. We don't have bombs.
Right.
So
I get the point, though. Yeah.
It's interesting to follow these things to their logical conclusion and understand, and especially a company like Twitter, or it's once you understand their business model. So how much money has Twitter really made? Nothing. It's the worst investment ever. I used Twitter ads once. Most people don't use them. They're just bleeding money. So you have to ask yourself, okay, well, who are the investors in Twitter, and why are they investing? Well, Prince Alawid of Saudi Arabia is one of their principal investors. He was the one who was actually just arrested on corruption charges.
Oh, wow.
And so you start to draw connect the dots and realize, okay, well, if you're a principal investor, then you're just using this as a means of control. You're not trying to make any money off of it. And you look at companies like NBC. Well, NBC is owned by General Electric. Same with MSNBC. And so it's like, okay, well, General Electric is not making a ton of money off this. Or the Washington Post. Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post when it was going insolvent, because they weren't making any money anymore, and they're still not making any money. But they don't say anything bad about Amazon, and they keep the heat off of them. And
most people never hear that kind of information. I'm super excited for the Everipedia project coming out on EOS, because that's a decentralized Wikipedia, and yes, people can change their Wikipedia, and yes, it'll be hard to kind of decipher which information is true or not. That you'll have to use your own resources for that. But the fact that you're going to decentralize platform for information, That is
Yeah.
going to be super interesting to see what comes out about different governments that wasn't supposed to come out, especially if it's anonymous, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a company like Google, so I mean, the way the internet works, it's essentially just caches of information. So it's whatever is stored on Google's servers is essentially what you see, and what you don't see is, the dark net. So Google can scrub out of existence pretty much anything. I remember, if you remember, there was a bad picture of Beyonce a couple years ago, and somehow that got scrubbed from the internet.
No way.
Yeah. So one thing we're doing, actually, we're launching it on Monday, is we have a blockchain that we put out, and we have an AI sifting through certain news articles, certain social media posts, cataloging it, putting it all on a blockchain, so you can't just delete something and pretend it never happened. So we're sort
I'd
of
be super
selectively.
interested to see how that goes, and then if you can also get any correlations or causations drawn from that, to see like, oh well, these different news sources were talking about this, and then over here like Bitcoin jumped up 10 grand, or the news was talking about this school shooting. Well, then what laws were signed over in the UK or something that they don't want us to know about in the United States? Like just things like that. If there's
Yeah.
anything like correlated.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're going to be targeting a lot of the places that are most susceptible to this stuff, especially, companies like 4chan, kind of the last bastions of free speech. They're getting hit by all sorts of DDoS attacks, and, things are disappearing. So I think you always have to be on the lookout, keeping an eye out, and it's good to have some of it backed up somewhere, because people think it's hard to erase, but a lot of the times it isn't. A lot of people will delete a tweet, pretend it never happened, and it's hard to prove them otherwise unless someone caught it. For big accounts that happens, but people have Photoshop now too, so it's entirely possible that you just fake it, and then in the argument over what is true and what is not, ultimately the point is lost.
Ain't that the truth?
So yeah, as far as social media in general, where do you see it going in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you think a lot of engagement numbers are going down for some of the bigger platforms? Companies like Snapchat are sort of struggling to figure out how they monetize, and people are getting bored. Do you think something new is going to rise up? Do you think the ones that are out there now are just going to keep doing what they're doing? What's your opinion?
Yes, Snapchat is having a tough time in general right now. They've lost like billions in their valuation, I believe.
Yeah.
Just from different influencers like Kylie Jenner saying she hates it,
Yeah.
Rihanna and that whole thing. So it's interesting to see how that is played, and I wonder how much of that public media. See, people share that kind of information on Facebook, so I wonder how much Facebook in themselves is promoting it, or kind of gaming the algorithm toward those and making them more
Yeah.
popular. I think it's competition.
Yeah.
So in general, I think a lot of people are going to go over to Twitch and platforms like that with the live streaming. Facebook will be Facebook because of the giant data that it has, and the pure marketing. Like marketers love it because you can target anyone based on anything, and that's just on the marketer's side. Like we don't even know how deep their own data goes. Google is still going to be Google because that's the first thing you go to when you search anything. Amazon is not social media in general, but they're going to be more in your house, in your car, in your office, everywhere.
Yeah.
That's what they're going for.
They have Alexa in cars now, so.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Actually, to piggyback on your point, the NSA and Amazon work very closely. I think all the Alexas have a backdoor to the NSA, and that's why they're trying to get them into every room and every place where they might not have a mic on you. If you look at actually, Google Earth was funded by the CIA.
Wow.
And that's public knowledge. The CIA actually has a VC fund for tech companies. And they're asking for something in return there.
And speaking of CIA in general too, I was just going down the rabbit hole and doing more research, and I found out that, you know, like a lot of people say, the governments and the big banks didn't see Bitcoin and crypto coming. Like it's a revolution. But I found that the CIA had access to the early on Bitcoin alert keys. And that was like an alert, I believe, that was sent out to everybody on the Bitcoin network if a change was made or something. But that happened early on, so they had access to those keys. So that's super interesting that, you know, the CIA had super what do you call it? Super early interest in all that stuff.
Yeah, you know, they're way ahead of the game on a lot of this. They're keeping their eye out. I mean, at the end of the day, their job is to identify any risks, I guess, to the central.
We don't know at the end of the day what their job is.
Yeah, well, that's true. Their official job. Yeah, they've got a hand in everything all over the world. If you look at it, you know, they're hacking every election they can, and I'm sure they're trying to keep an eye out. And I think the interesting thing, you know, the power of government is really derived from the money supply, and so if you reduce that power by operating outside of the government, and especially if you can do it in a way that's not just a cash economy, that's very dangerous to a lot of people in power, because that can be sort of their axis of control. Especially, you know, while we were at South by Southwest, we had a representative from the Swedish government, or not Swedish, the Switzerland's government, the Swiss government, approach us. That's where all the central banks are headquarters, most big banks, and so they're really trying to attract crypto, I think, because that's their biggest threat. So they want to keep it close to home.
It's kind of like, I mean, in my personal opinion, but in general, the power structure of how everything is set up. We'll say everything in the world as a general statement. Yeah. I personally, I mean, I might change my mind tomorrow, but I personally think that at this time, kind of like how like the Roman government, or Rome fell, but the government didn't really, like the powers didn't really. I think that's how it's going to happen again, is that, you know, even in the next few years, if we see a major economic crash around the world, or even like a world war coming up, I don't know. If we see all that stuff, I don't think the powers and the leverage won't change at all. I mean, I don't think it will change at all. But I think the means of how most people can communicate and operate with each other will.
Yeah, especially.
That makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely globally. I mean, the internet just allowed people from across the world to communicate for the first time. And, you know, I've been to Russia, and having been to Russia, you realize the people are not the enemy of the United States. These are nice people, they're normal people, and the internet gives you access to all those groups that are somewhat segmented, and you can get your own opinion about them and interact. And so it's the government's.
But it's like the underlying thing of the internet is it was supposed to be like the decentralization of the information, right? So we could all communicate to each other. But look where we're at now. It didn't happen. Like in Bitcoin and like crypto, it's supposed to be the decentralization of money. Will that happen? I mean, I don't have a crystal ball in front of me, but I mean.
Yeah, I think.
And that's a very sad outlook. But in general, like life will get better for people in general. I'm just saying how the current structure of how things are set up might not change as much as people think.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, there's just so much content, it's difficult to discern what's reliable and what isn't. So you do have to kind of have this tribal mentality as to what you believe and what you don't believe. And it's gotten to the point where people who don't agree have just agreed to disagree and go their separate ways, which I think is worrisome.
And I encourage people, at least even in this, I encourage people to listen to me and like hear what I'm saying, but don't take it as pure fact just because I'm saying it on a podcast. You know, I want people to understand what I'm saying and understand the perspective and like why I'm saying it, like the research I've done, but I want them to do their own research and make their own judgments. I made a Facebook group about crypto specifically to talk about like objective facts about different things. So I try to give people like a rundown objectively what's going on, and so people can make their own decisions, because I mean that's the best way in my opinion going forward.
Yeah, no, I agree. Do you think some of the tech giants were kind of thrown off by crypto? It seems like they've been very slow to adopt it. I
No,
know, back in the day, Amazon back in November bought the domains for AmazonBitcoin.com and AmazonEthereum.com. I don't know, maybe they're just slow to adopt because they're waiting for people to catch up. But I do think, if you think about the business models, most of the money that's made is through finance. So, Wall Street, just moving money around is where a lot of, most of the money in the world is made. And crypto as an
pop
institution,
taxes.
yeah, exactly. But I think as an institution, crypto can be kind of a threat to a lot of these things, especially a tech company that isn't used to dealing with actual financial transactions.
For sure.
They're focused on data, but if you combine tech and finance, you're gonna create a juggernaut that is much more valuable than just selling
For
ads
sure.
to people, which is essentially what they do.
Definitely. I mean, there's already a decentralized Amazon and a decentralized Facebook. We'll consider that Steemit, but they're not as near popular because of the power and leverage they've already accumulated, the information they've already accumulated. Like their market share for attention, like Zuckerberg thrives on attention.
Yeah.
That's where the leverage is at. So, I mean, we already have Steemit, we already have the decentralized Amazon, but it's just a matter of fact is how popular they're going to get.
Yeah,
But
it's a
then
matter of getting
control the
people over
information
there.
about them.
Yeah, it seems like
Might
they're
do-
kind. Go ahead.
They might do what Zucks is doing to Evan Spiegel right now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with you there. It seems like though they're, yeah, I guess they've been sort of slow. They've been slow to adapt, and I think they've also been sort of stuck in their ideological uh, bents. Silicon Valley is definitely, um, you know, they're definitely in their own sort of circle, and I think they're kind of naive as to what the rest of the world thinks, and they might even be buying into their own propaganda as far as what they're seeing and what they're hearing, and I think that can be dangerous, but that can also be sort of their downfall, because if you think from a business perspective, why are you alienating 50+% of your audience? It's really not smart, and I think this last election really proved to a lot of people that was the case, but it might have been a lot of older people, and the problem is, the younger people are next in line. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting going forward, seeing how these big companies tackle these different issues, especially data. So there's a company here in LA, one of my good friends is working with, called DataVest, where they're trying to create a crypto so that you can sell your personal data back to companies. I'm not sure, the viability, just because I don't think, unless you force these companies to stop taking your data, I don't know if they're going to willingly buy it back from you, because it's fairly cheap for them to do. But the awareness of how much data there is, I think people are starting to wake up as to what the ramifications could be, and maybe there might be a resurgence in privacy and people thinking about that. Do you think people have just sort of given up on the idea of privacy?
Yes, in a sense, until they have that wake up moment, where they realize that it's been very harmful to them. I think it was Andreas Antonopoulos said that people don't really care about their information in the Western cultures because they haven't needed to. But if you go to a place that's been manipulated super bad, like let's say Greece, like those people really care about their information and their privacy.
Yeah.
So,
And a country like China, so China, and this is something that ties back to tech companies again. Google was willing to censor China's internet just to get their foot in the door. So if these companies are willing to do that with China, who's to say they're not doing that in the U.S. as well, or in France or in Europe? But one thing China has done now is they've enacted what they call it's a citizenship score, kind of like a credit score. So if you get caught jaywalking, then
That's scary.
you'll get dinged. And actually, what they've done is they've made these scores part of the decision making process as to whether you can use public transportation or you can go on a plane. So
Oh my.
yeah, that's pretty terrifying, and I don't think that's that far off. I think you know they've done it. People haven't put up a huge fuss, but that's something that could be happening here that we don't even realize. Just like there have been a lot of developers coming out of places like Google talking about how they have these blacklists of people who either get shadow banned, or they have them on this sort of like naughty list. People who you don't want to interact with. They minimize your posts within the algorithm. And I think that's
Interesting.
really worrisome. A lot of developers, they'll say, I don't agree with the ideology of the people who are being pursued, but at the same time, something about this doesn't quite sit right with me.
Mhm.
And I'm hoping more people wake up to that. Let's see. Here's the post. Yeah, they said it's called the Human Intelligence Team at Google, which they said is essentially a propaganda team. So they make certain topics trend to persuade public opinion. They call it the groupthink method, which is like consensus cracking. So they try and convince people through bots and through conversations with bots. So if you've used, there are a lot of chat bots out there using AI where they start to understand how you communicate and they can respond accordingly. They can talk about different topics, and they're talking about how they're using a lot of these bots to persuade people of things. And that's really worrisome. And they're trying to minimize traffic to places like 4chan, and if
And
you
people
look,
people don't even realize like the effect that any kind of information in general has on you. Um, Tony Robbins had like a study in one of his books or something one time he talked about where they gave someone a cup of cold water. They walked down the street and they asked them a question about some politician, and the people would reply like 75% of the time with like, oh, they're cold, they're kind of mean looking. And then they would do the same thing with like a cup of warm water, and then 75% of the time, it was like a warm response. Like they look nice, nice smile, great hair. So it's even holding a cup of temperature, cold or hot water, changing your total thoughts. Like people don't even understand. Like if on your news feed, if someone, even if they post an article about something you don't agree with, the fact that that thought has now entered your mind will change some aspect of your thinking in the future.
yeah, there's huge power in just association, so word association, and that's actually something Trump was really good about. And he was, very forward with it, but he'd give people names like Little Marco or Pocahontas, and so the first thing people would think of, Crooked Hillary, was that word association, and he would tie it to something, something
And that's
they
part
were
of the
not proud
marketing
of.
for that's part of the marketing for the attention. So the attention's all on Trump, but we don't know that, oh, this law just got passed in Congress, or because that's not talked about. So
Yeah.
when the attention's on him, if he says something, Trump is great for whatever the government's trying to do right now, because if you love him, then you really just like loving all his information he gives out. You think it's funny when he calls him like Little Rocket Man.
Yeah.
But if you hate him, then you're going to be sharing an article about him that says, I hate this guy. He keeps insulting people. He hates women, things like that. So it's all the attention is going on to him, but it's
Yeah.
distraction.
And a lot of it, it's a survival instinct. So if you're within this community of people, it's in your best interest to agree with them. If if you're not a deeply philosophical or political person and you don't care that much, then why not just agree with what everyone else seems to be doing or what all your friends are doing? Because you don't want to stir up a fuss and risk alienating those people. But at scale, which is what's happening, especially at colleges, you can't really speak up. You can't really say things. At UT,
Right.
where I went, it's a very hostile environment to anyone who goes against sort of an increasingly radical narrative.
That's crazy.
I was a Trump supporter. I mean, I interned at his White House, but I wasn't even willing to wear a Trump hat on campus because I was probably going to get beat up or maced or something. So I think that's sort of the personification of what you're talking about, this mentality where people think that there are a lot more people on their side, and if the media is on their side, then they don't have a whole lot to worry about. Do you think a lot of the traditional media outlets are gonna continue to diminish in their influence? Do you think people are gonna want somewhere to go where they at least think that things are factual or things have been more thoroughly vetted?
So in terms of like their actual company, it might diminish a little bit, but in terms of influence and power over the psychology of people, I don't think so, because they will continue to do things like paying somebody to be a fake person on Facebook. They'll continue to send fake bots. It's big in crypto, at least it was like, I think a week or two ago. A lot of people were getting those Ethereum giveaways, send me half an ETH and I'll send you 10 back. And so a lot of influencers have been talking about that. Yeah. So those bots are actually crazy. So a lot of people can hack simply into an Instagram or a Twitter account, and it will show that it's verified. They will change the name of it to like an influencer. So say we're on Twitter. They can hack into a verified account. They can change the name of it. So it says Charlie Lee, it's verified. They copy the same bio. They retweet, or not retweet, but they like copy and paste his same exact tweets. They share his videos, things like that. So things like that will happen. And it all comes down, it's a big game of psychology. I mean, that's all it is. Yeah. It's people understanding how their own mind works, down to actually like how your brain works, and how your emotions work, all that stuff, and then deciding what information you think is best for you and like your family and friends.
So where do you typically go to read about things, or who are people you like to follow?
For crypto or just anything?
Yeah, I'd say for crypto, and then if there's anyone else that jumps out at you.
For crypto, I like to keep my news from kind of like the troll people on Twitter. There's like meme accounts, the traders.
Yeah.
I think it's funny because if you understand how their jokes and their information is delivered, then you can understand the actual point that they're trying to get across. So Twitter is huge. I follow the developers. That's like the best source of information because it's straight from their mouth or from their thumbs. For crypto, I'd say Twitter and friends. That's being a big part of the community is very important.
Do you have any specific people that you would suggest?
I just say developers. Okay. Just a blanket statement, because they're usually the most truthful of like the biggest projects, right? You don't want a developer of a fake coin to start shilling a coin. You want the Charlie Lees, you want the Vitaliks, the Andreas Antonopoulos, Tony Lane Casserly, things like that.
Okay.
The people that actually speak their mind. So that's for crypto and like blockchain in general. I also like the Cointelegraph, things like that for the news. But I also keep in the back of my head that every piece of content is going to be biased in one way or another. So why is this being said? Who's writing it? Things like that. And then information in general, it just depends on what I'm trying to learn. I've gone from psychology to like neuroscience, meditation, spirituality, government, politics, like international banking, trying to learn different pieces of the whole puzzle.
Exactly. It all fits together. You have to understand the big picture.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I think people assume all these things are happening in a vacuum, but that's not the case. Everyone is experiencing everything simultaneously, so all these things work in conjunction.
Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, I mean, we're all humans. We're all trying to get toward the same goal. It's just that when you have a different environment, or your brain's structured a little bit differently, or you have different personal experiences, and that's when opinions start to diverge.
Yeah, and I think just understanding that alone is really important. Just understanding the role of, things like, serotonin, dopamine levels. And
Hmm.
once you start to experiment around and you notice, or you start tracking how you feel and correlating, that with your brain chemistry, or maybe you
Hmm.
start to realize, what alcohol does to you. You're getting a spike in GABA, and so that's
Right.
making you feel relaxed. But a lot of people who have never, experimented with any drugs other than
Hmm.
alcohol or something like that, they probably don't understand how much of an influence, how one person's world can be so different from the world of someone else.
And it
And what
always
can,
goes back to the centralized education thing too. So like people will grow up with that mentality. They won't know that alcohol, like, yeah, they know it's bad for you, but they don't understand like how bad it is for you. People don't understand that you're not naturally supposed to be drinking dairy. Um,
yeah,
Sugar is like in everything, and it's not good on a big sense, especially how it affects your brain. Like it, when you eat like a high sugar diet, it totally rewires your reward system in your brain, and you physically don't even feel that because you don't even know what's happening.
yeah, there were
And people
big
don't understand.
campaigns actually from
Yeah.
the sugar industry back in the day, trying to push the blame onto carbohydrates and fats and away from sugar, and even
Right.
marijuana. Marijuana, one of the main reasons it's illegal is because plastic
Hmm.
manufacturers were threatened by hemp plastics. And so
Wow.
you trace back the history and you start to realize, these are all just preconceived notions that we haven't really thought too much about or traced back. And once an idea is out there, it tends to spread without a lot of people double checking why it's like that at all. A lot of something like, peyote, for example. Humans, they're 40,000 years ago. We have cave paintings of people holding peyote cactuses. And in the last, 40 years, we've decided that that's bad for you all of a sudden without any sort of scientific research. So it's really
Yeah, and then they
interesting.
ban the scientific research. So it's even in blockchain in general. I reached out to one of my friends who's like one of the top advisors, developers in the industry, and I was like, what would be really cool is if we could decentralize like this medicine industry in general. And he's saying, yeah, you could even include drugs into that as well. Like the
Yeah.
research behind it, because if you can do like an ICO and crowdfund across the world for more research into like acid or peyote, like you're saying, like in general, like it'd be super interesting to see what effects actually come out of that.
Hey, we'll help you on that ICO. We can build you a coin in a couple days. But yeah, no, I think that stuff is fascinating. And even for supply chain, we had several big companies offering us contracts to do supply chain for marijuana in Canada and California, because you want to know each step of the process, where it's coming
Hmm.
from, make sure it's sourced correctly. Even we had people in Africa talking to us about doing the same for blood diamonds and gold.
Hmm.
So
How about
it's all
water? That'd be kind of cool.
water. I don't know how you would track that. I
I don't
guess.
know either, but
Yeah. No, but I mean that's actually something interesting too. There's just something put out by the UN saying by 2050 we might have a water crisis, and things like,
crazy.
there are a lot of things like solar flares, for example. Nothing people think about on a day-to-day basis, but solar flares could knock down every satellite in our atmosphere in a matter of minutes, wipe out our electrical grid for a full year, and
I
at
mean,
that point,
this is a rabbit hole too, because I mean,
yeah,
even a small solar flare will affect the magnetic frequencies of the entire Earth, and you won't even know it, but you'll physically be like thinking different thoughts or be in a different reality than you're even aware of.
yeah, no, exactly. All these
It gets so
externalities.
deep. We can talk about this for hours.
Yeah, I mean, cut me off at any time if you have stuff to do, but I love talking about this stuff. I think it's fascinating, and I think it's not something a lot of people hear about. And if they do, they slap a conspiracy theory label onto it, and you know, people don't want to be associated with that because there's always this guilt by association, which has been really aggressively pushed recently. If you even had a conversation with a white nationalist, you by pure association are now put into that
Mhm.
that group companies like Southern Poverty Law Center have really done a number. They're outside UT every day trying to get people to sign up, and you ask them, what are you guys doing? We're fighting hate. And you ask them,
what does that mean?
Yeah, and it's I'll ask them about several of the people that they have on their list of people who are supposedly racist, just people who have, a couple guys who have maybe come out against Islam, or just stuff that is crazy, because you listen to them actually speak, which is something I encourage everyone to do, is before you decide who someone is just because it's posted somewhere, go and listen to what they have to say, because these guys
that goes back to your whole hat wearing thing. Like, you didn't want to wear a hat because
yeah
do that.
yeah, it's really dangerous. And just back to sort of clickbaity headlines where they misrepresent the rest of the story, and because you can't really get sued for libel just for a headline if you clarify in the story, but most people don't even read the stories anymore, they read the headlines. So you're getting this picture of reality that just isn't true, and you'll say, oh, I read that, and you'll think, well, no, I didn't read it, I just read the headline, but I assumed that was all there was to be said about a topic.
Another book I recommend it's super short. It's recommended by Bill Gates, and it's one of his reading lists. It's called How to Lie with Statistics. It just goes through different tactics that people use to lie with statistics. They might say, 5 out of 10 people do this, but doesn't talk about the study at all. Doesn't talk about what they were measuring. Doesn't talk about
oh
it
yeah,
actually is. They just say statistic, put it on a headline, and then that totally shoots opinion.
Yeah, you can make any numbers work to your favor if you want to, and that's dangerous as well for things like publishing papers. If you think about who funds a lot of research, typically it's companies, especially back to drug research. Typically drug companies hiring scientists to do these studies, but they don't publish any of the studies that run counter to the narrative. So if the study says it doesn't work or it's likely to kill someone, but 2 positive studies say something different, guess which ones are going to get published.
The first thing I think of is those commercials you see on TV sometimes that are like, this will solve your heartburn, but it's like cause of death, cause of potential, everything.
Yeah, and most of these things have never really been tested, especially long term, like SSRIs. No one has been on an SSRI for 80 years and figured out what it does, down the line to your brain. They're assuming that the animal testing is going to be accurate, but even people like Brett Weinstein, he tried to get a paper published talking about how the telomere length of rats is actually longer than humans, which means they can recover significantly faster due to any type of trauma or inflammation. Essentially all the things that would mess you up from testing drugs on them, they actually heal much quicker if his hypothesis is correct, and he wasn't able to get that paper published. Because, can you imagine if they had to redo the tests of, every drug they've ever put on
one step further down the rabbit hole, there already is at least work that has been circulated throughout the internet, or even books that show that we have enough food to feed everybody in the world. We have literally free energy. People are creating energy by using gravity. Have you seen those lights in Africa? They have a weight on them. They'll pick it up.
No, I haven't seen
it. It slowly drops down from gravity pulling it down, and then it powers a small generator, so they have a free light.
Even nuclear power. I mean, nuclear power is infinite energy, and we don't even use it because of
magnetic, or we have all the information, we have all the resources. But it's just interesting how it's all playing out. It's all like a fun game. It's like a movie. We're all just observing this movie, and it's super interesting.
And people assume, what they see on the news is what's happening, but then you think back, any time I've had to, anything you do, starting a company, the difference between what hits the press and what hits an article about us versus how much goes on in the background to get to that point is massive. So that there's so much going on behind the scenes, and you listen you listen to a lot of these people talk. I think if you haven't watched the Putin interviews, I always recommend that because it's like 6 years of just back and forth every year. Who was it? It's not Roger Stone. It's another Stone, more famous one, movie maker. But he goes back and forth for 6 years and talks to him every year about how things are going, what his opinions on things are, and hearing sort of how geopolitics plays out on that level is very interesting because you realize a group of realistically 40 to 100 people decides what happens all over the place, and a lot of these
that's not even a conspiracy theory. That's literally like going through data, and it's actually like facts. Like that's not.
Yeah, and that's
that's crazy. It's like it's not even like debatable. It's all there. It's
but
public information at this point.
Again, yeah, and that's the problem too. Though there's just so much information and people being pushed in a certain direction. Like how many people have actually read the emails from WikiLeaks or anything WikiLeaks has actually published? Everyone assumes someone is looking at it, but who knows? There's not a lot of primary research, a lot of declassified documents. Trump's been declassifying a lot of the JFK documents, and you actually read through those and it's terrifying. They'll talk about how the Joint Chiefs of Staff approved a plan, like a false flag attack, that they were going to blame on Cuba during the JFK administration that was going to kill 100 American citizens, and JFK was the only one who didn't sign off on it, which is why it didn't happen. And this is public knowledge. Or like the Mockingbird program.
Even a much more recent note, like was it Hawaii that had like nuclear bomb text messages sent out?
Yeah.
Multiple times. Like how does that even?
Well, I'm gonna get you into the Q drops after we get done. You're gonna love that. So it's there's some rabbit holes I can take you down that'll paint.
The last little point I want to make too is that I saw this guy talking the other day on YouTube, and he was talking about a lot of people were fearing that we were going to a 1984 Orwellian society of Big Brother and all that.
Yeah.
But what's actually more likely to occur is, I forgot what it was. It's based off another book idea of the always happy society. So it's like.
Yeah, Brave New World is probably what you're thinking about.
It might be. But
is it Brave New World?
It might be. I think so.
Yeah, that's a Huxley novel. So Huxley actually famously. He did most of his work after doing mescaline, which is peyote essentially, and that's kind of what he bases some of his stuff on. But I wrote a paper on that back in high school about 1984 versus Brave New World, and I think we've sort of gotten the worst of both realities, where we have this, we have this giant surveillance state, but at the same time, we've got this influx of drugs, especially like opiates and a lot of the cigarettes, for example. All of the worst things for us, or the stuff that's least likely to have a positive impact on our life, is legal: alcohol, cigarettes, and then you've got everyone going to movies and strip clubs, and there is an emphasis on pleasure, and tons of people are watching or addicted to porn, and so there is this dichotomy of, on one hand, they know who you are, they can go after you for any sort of violation because there are millions of laws that no one can keep up with, but they're also keeping people in place by giving them just enough so that it's worth getting through tomorrow and doing it all over again.
And it's always a faceless they, like quote unquote they.
Yeah.
Because they actually pay to keep out of the media because they control it all.
Oh,
so
yeah.
When people say, Jeff Bezos just became like the richest guy, or Bill Gates is like the richest, it's like, no, you don't know who the richest person is. It's not even documented.
The Saudis don't have tax returns; they own the government. I mean, on paper, just the main Saudi Arabian oil company is worth $2 trillion, which is far more than anything we can imagine, and they've been making a killing off of it for the last 30 years. So they're worth trillions at least. And then you look at, someone like the Rothschilds. I mean, it's not a conspiracy to say that the Rothschild family exists. They've been rich for like 150 years, if not more. Not just rich, the richest man on the planet for a while, and it's like that money doesn't go away. Time plus money plus interest equals far more money. And if Paris Hilton just married one of them as her sugar daddy, that guy's got some insane money stashed away.
And it's tough because it's centralized, but at the same time, it's not necessarily. I mean, good and bad is subjective, right? So it is bad in the sense that there is no control, but it is good in the sense that we wouldn't have this world today if we didn't have all that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, and that's the one thing that I have a hard time with is I don't think these people are inherently bad people. I think that either we just don't know something, and that's very likely. I mean, it's like if they knew something, if they knew that like aliens had been here for the last 2,000 years, the chances they would tell everyone is pretty much zero. So just under the assumption that anything that crazy would never be told to the public, you can work backwards and realize, well, maybe these people aren't bad. Maybe they're doing what they think is right. Maybe it is right. Maybe it's better that we don't have to live with these inconvenient truths. Like when the CIA director testified to Congress, he said, the things I know would keep Americans awake at night. Like, you guys should thank me for taking on this burden. And to a point, I was like, you know what? The guy's right. Like, who knows the kinds of stuff that he has to live with knowing, and I don't know what's better at that point.
And that's kind of, if we could summarize like this whole entire thing, like in crypto and social media and news and life in general.
Yeah.
It's that everybody is acting out of their own belief that they are right.
Yeah.
And so, in that sense, I want people to at least take away that just understand how your own mind works, understand, how you can be influenced by news, especially for cryptos. If you're throwing money in, at least understand why you're putting money in, and not just like, oh, I think it's great technology, but why do you personally think it's great technology, and go deeper in that sense. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great place to stop. I really appreciate you coming on. I really enjoyed talking to you. We'll have to have you have you back sometime. Is there any final parting thing you want to plug? Any a Twitter handle or somewhere people can see more about you, or something they should reference from the conversation that you would suggest?
If they want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter, you're both at MooreJared0, so MooreJared0. But other than that, I think people should just learn about themselves. It sounds bad, but you need to be selfish in the sense that you know what you want and you know why you want it, and don't just accept that reality is reality because it is. But then you can actually change it in the sense of understanding what you are about, and that's kind of at least what crypto's been bringing about for me, like learning about it.
All right. Well, with that, I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and we'll be back soon with more guests, more news, and more insights. Thanks, guys.